Hey guys, over time there have been quite a few Herald of Thunder builds, Ignite Herald of Thunder, Auto Herald of Thunder with the Storm Secrets and Storm Gift, and I never really did a Poison Herald of Thunder because it always looked bad. But finally I decided to give it a try because I just had an Occultist, and this is an Occultist. I had an Occultist basically pre-built, just had to do a bit of refunding and then a lot of puzzling item choices. There are things that are pretty difficult to obtain for this build, and Herald of Thunder is not very flexible. It does have a spell tag, but it is not a spell. Whenever thinking about would that give damage to the Herald of Thunder, think about is it a spell or not. And for that reason it was actually very difficult to get enough global chance to poison, because I am using a Lone Messenger which disables other auras and you can only use one Herald skill. So getting enough global chance to poison was pretty difficult. Now, a good thing is that this build was actually a lot more viable even in highest rated maps than I expected, because looking at the numbers, path of building numbers, in path of building cruelty is not calculated. It does not calculate the damage over time effect. As you can see, my poison DPS does not change when changing cruelty. And against big bosses I do not get full effect of cruelty, so to kind of simulate that I add a swift affliction. But cruelty does also give more damage with hits, which is good because I also need leech, and that's why I'm also not using deadly ailments. So if you look at the numbers, 92,000 poison DPS per poison is not that great. However, I do have two low tolerance jewels, which each gives 300% increased damage against non-poisoned enemies. So basically the first poison against the enemy gonna have 600% increased poison damage, which is pretty massive. This damage is also not against enemies on low life. Against low life it does increase quite a bit more. I only still have 90% chance to poison. So the chance to poison, since it is not a spell, you cannot use Cluster Jewel or take the passive node. For example, this one passive node, 15% chance to poison on hit with spell damage doesn't work. It's not a spell. It does have a spell tag, but it is not a spell. Just like adding flat here's damage to spells wouldn't give any damage to you. Now, the way I'm poisoning, by the way, using Volkuur's Guidance, this build would not work without corrupted Volkuur's Guidance gloves. And the reason is that Curse on Hit ring works a bit different than Curse on Hit gloves. It's not explained anywhere, I believe, unless you dig through GG explanations, but Curse on Hit gloves apply curse before the hit, and Curse on Hit ring applies the curse after the hit. And the reason it is important because this is Occultist with the Profane Bloom. Imagine this, you hit the enemy with the Herald of Thunder, it's fine, it gets cursed. Then it degens and dies and explodes and hits other enemies. But if that hit kills those other enemies, then those other enemies are not cursed because the curse was applied after the hit. They do not chain explode. For that reason you have to get curse on hit gloves. Unfortunately those are pretty much impossible to get as of right now, and I had to make those myself, just buying a bunch of lighting Volkuur's Guidance and just corrupting and hoping to hit either Temp Chain or Despair on hit. Previously I had Enfeeble on hit, but those are not ideal. I really wanted either Despair or Temp Chain because I have 3 curses actually. If you can get these gloves, then the build becomes viable, because then you can chain explode and have a pretty decent clear speed, actually very decent clear speed. There's still one issue that I don't have 100% chance to poison. You could use Cosprey's Will body armor, which does give 60% chance to poison against cursed enemies, but that's again against cursed enemies. You have to curse enemies to get enough chance to poison, and it's just not ideal. You really need global chance to poison elsewhere. You could also add Correlator's Flask to get to 100%, but for clear speed it's fine. You don't need 100% for clear speed. And for bossing, Plague Barrier does quite a good job at dealing with bosses as well. I didn't do Cirrus, I didn't do Maven, but I did Minotaur with like very easy mods, and it wasn't fast, but I actually managed to defeat Minotaur without dying. As for clear speed, it works pretty well, can do tier 15, 16s. Obviously probably not like super juiced up because this build is squishy. I do have blind on hit with my casting damage taken setup, which I proc pretty constantly because Storm Secret Ring does damage to me. By the way, if you're not familiar with the Herald of Thunder build, I have a couple other videos with Herald of Thunder builds. I don't want to make one video too long. I would recommend you to go watch those other videos to learn more about in general how Herald of Thunder builds work with Storm Secret. And yeah, for other items, Volkuur guidance gloves with the corruption with course on hit are kind of a must. Other than that, Storm Secret. And other items are pretty normal, just rare with resistances, life and stuff like that. For the weapon there are other choices, but Cane of Kulemak, specifically this one with a lot of lightning damage, because lightning damage also increases the poison damage because I can poison with my lightning hit, so it increases the base, and also this has here's damage over time multiplier, which works well, and chance to shock is also great because I do need to shock to proc Herald of Thunder. Without Storm Secret Ring, you have to kill a shocked enemy, but when you use Storm Secret, basically you have to just proc a shock. Now, how do I shock big targets? Because you still need to hit hard enough to proc the shock. And focus mode on a ring. Shock nearby enemy for 4 seconds when you focus. You have to be close to the target. It's not very big distance. It's pretty small distance. You basically run to a boss, click the focus mode, you shock it, then you proc the Herald of Thunder, which lasts for... yeah, the Herald of Thunder lasts for around 6 seconds. The focus has 8-second cooldown. So sometimes you may have some downtime if you're fighting like a really juicy boss, but there usually are other odds which you can hit with the arc. By the way, why I chose arc is also pretty important. Now arc is linked with punishment curse, hex touch, decay, and temporal chain. Now decay with arc works very well because arc says 15% more damage for each remaining chain, and that scales decay. It doesn't specify for hits or ailments because decay is not an ailment. While arc has plus 10 chains, so you're basically getting up to 150% more damage for decay. So decay also adds quite a bit of damage. Actually, if you look at PUB, Val Arc and decay has 72,000 DPS. That is if it has not chain. If you just hit the boss with Val Arc directly. If you start chaining, then you see that it starts losing damage. But Val Arc works also so well against big enemy packs. You just shoot it and it sometimes clears 2 screens away because remember, it curses enemy. It actually triple curses the enemy because of the gloves and other 2 curses, and then cursed enemies explode, cursing other enemies, and it just chain explodes a couple screens away. I only have 4 jewels that I can use to get chance to poison, and each jewel has to have chance to poison. So jewels like that, it can only roll up to 5% chance to poison. Fortunately, those are not very expensive, like 10-20 years depending on other mods. I do actually use pretty expensive Transcendent Mind jewel, which is not mandatory, but it does give quite a bit of damage. If you look at path of building again, if I remove that, I do lose around 10k poison DPS. So it's not mandatory, but it does give quite a big chunk of damage. And as for defenses, I have blind, I have dodge, I got temp chain obviously. By the way, punishment also works like a defensive layer. It does have the defensive part. When enemies hit you, they get cursed with the punishment, which lowers their damage, and then we also take increased damage against when we are on low life. For the body armor, I also got additional curse body armor. I got pretty lucky making this body armor, but you basically just need +1 curse and then whatever else you can get. The helmet, nearby enemies have -9 here's resistance. It's pretty nice. It's maybe not that important. You could also get Herald of Thunder damage enchantment. Probably would be pretty similar damage. On the amulet, this actually wasn't that expensive. I believe I only paid 1 exalt, but these are pretty rare. Here's damage over time multiplier and +1 to level of intelligence skill gems. Also would work +1 to spell skill gems because Herald of Thunder does have a spell tag. You can also use +1 to spell weapons, but the spell damage will not affect Herald of Thunder, and flat damage is also not gonna be added to the Herald of Thunder unless it is not specified if it's for attacks or for spells. So if you want to copy this build, I'm gonna leave a path for building import code in the description. I thought that this build is only gonna be for clearing maps and it's not really gonna be very viable for bossing, but it turns out it's actually better than I expected. You can probably invest more into this build and make it more viable for bossing, and I suspect this could actually be pretty decent for bossing with a better investment. But I get bored of builds pretty fast and I just want to move on to the next build. And I don't want to spoil the next build because people are gonna say, oh, you're copying metal. Wait, I guess I did spoil my build. Uh, anyway, that's gonna be it for now. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.